New year, new game. Or old game that's new to me. I've made reference to Gun before in LTA's history, that being in genre bunkmate Call of War as Gunslinger, and the callback I made to it during Condemned. My personal knowledge of Gun begins with knowing that it's a Western shooter and ends with me remembering the striking box art on the rental store shelf, but not picking it up because I was young and trying to get teen-rated games for the weekend was already a hassle. No way in hell would a gritty M-rated game with swearing and over-the-top violence be making it back home with me. That cover, though, it's one that has been stuck in my mind ever since I saw it. That bright yellow background made it stick out amidst the sea of other covers, and the twin revolvers resting on a sun-bleached skull tells you as little as possible about what the game might be about. Even the name is emblematic of this effort. Gun is a generic word that doesn't offer up any insight, but also one that has incredibly pointed meaning. Guns are loud and violent, usually meant to end conflict as swiftly as possible. Mysteriously captivating is how I would describe this, giving you but a tiny inkling about what you might be getting yourself into, the only way to sate your curiosity being to pop the disc in and see what's to unfold. Wait, this is a Neversoft title? The Tony Hawk fellas? This keeps getting stranger. Anywho, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video around. Maybe hit up my Patreon for at least $1 to become a ticket holder to get your name in the credits. Additional videos like thumbnail time lapses and the Showtime Reels, the scripts in their entirety, and more. Or don't, I ain't your Uncle Tony the Birdman Hawk. Not like anyone would recognize me. Yes, this is a Neversoft title. As with a few developers covered in this tab, I don't think they need an introduction, but what the hell, let's give them one. Before they were subsumed into the Activision Call of Duty mines alongside Raven and Sledgehammer, as that marks the end of their standalone history, and even before they were contracted out to develop the Tony Hawk series by their current captor, Neversoft started off as a three-man offshoot of Malibu Interactive, itself the spawn of Malibu Comics. I've covered the indie comic scene and the industry as a whole before in LTA Darkness and Ultimate Spider-Man, but if you want a short recap, artists were fed up with their treatment and formed their own brand, that being Image Comics. A similar vibe can be felt from Valiant and Dark Horse. It was kind of a pointed statement that you didn't have to be under the yoke if you didn't want to. At least that's what Image's mission statement was starting out. These kinds of things usually end up with the little man becoming the very company he escaped from. Sadly. However, while comic adaptations in game, TV show, and movie form were popular, the comics as a collectible bubble popped in the late 90s, causing a whole bunch of restructuring, acquisitions, and bankruptcy. If you can recall or haven't watched the Ultimate Spider-Man video, Marvel was in a tight spot because of this. Malibu is but one company that suffered during the period, winding up getting acquired by DC's rival. Most of you actually know a Malibu comic property. It was one of the highest grossing films of '97, Men in Black. So that's kind of the atmosphere surrounding this history. To actually get us somewhere, we'll need to hop back to late 1992, as that was when Malibu decided to get into game development. Probably because it was a growing industry, thus it had untapped economic potential. Corporate jargon for, we need money, bad. So on August 18th, through PR Newswire, a press release company, the following announcement was made. Malibu Graphics Publishing Group, one of the largest and fastest growing comic book publishers in North America, has merged with prominent video game creator and developer Acme Interactive to form Malibu Comics Entertainment, Incorporated. It was announced today by Scott Rosenberg, president of Malibu Graphics, and Bob Jacob, president of Acme. The new association marks the first such union between a comic book publisher and video game developer, and ensures Malibu Comics Entertainment not only heightened impact within both respective industries, but a leadership position in the burgeoning realm of comic book-based video game production, licensing, and distribution. Apologies for how mangled and cut off the image is. Furthermore, as I don't have much of any information on Acme Interactive before this merger, most I can say is that it was founded sometime in '91 by Robert Bob Jacob after his original company, Cinemaware, went bankrupt. Gleaning off that information, there are multiple provided reasons: increased piracy of their games, low sales, downturn, corporate meddling, but none I can find as the sufficient answer. The last game Cinemaware released was '91's TV Sports Boxing for the Amiga and DOS, which lines up with Acme's first game, '91's TV Sports Baseball for Amiga and DOS. Same shit, different company. The team is also scattered, with some having barely 10 credits to their names, and others having prominent titles under their belts. Nigel Spencer, a designer for Acme's earliest title, Bo Jackson Baseball, was a software engineer for 40K Space Marine and a pipeline programmer for XCOM 2 War of the Chosen. James Maxwell, another designer, was the studio director for both Backyard Wrestling games, the production director for Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, and assistant director for the director's cut of Shantae Risky's Revenge. All this to say that Acme was probably a halfway house of development. That's why Malibu picked them up. Larger does eat smaller, after all. Another reason I'm not going too hard into Acme's history, the merger, or Cinemaware, is that a measly 2 years later in '94, Marvel bought out Malibu in a bid to not be upstaged by DC, taking on the $200K cost that the video game studio had wrung out of Malibu monthly. That's where we properly begin, in the year '94, month July, with three dudes: Joel Jewett, Mick West, and Chris Ward. All three were connected to Malibu Interactive either on the development or financial side, and decided to jump from the sinking ship sometime either during or before the Marvel takeover. Of the three, Mick West had the greater experience, having been a part of the industry since '89 with his work on Steve Davis' World of Snooker. If the title didn't give it away, the fact that it was on the Atari ST should. I can't escape the British home computer craze. Mick is definitely the most interesting founder, as those not in the gaming sphere will know him as a professional conspiracy debunker, a modern-day Harry Houdini. That comes from his childhood. There's a phenomenal interview by US Gamer that goes into specifics, but I'll keep the info relative. Mainly his relationship to Malibu. From the interview, West would only develop one game for Malibu, Battletech, a game of armored combat, released in 1994 for the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, before jumping ship. As he tells it, the writing was already on the wall for the company. Malibu had poor leadership, no exciting games in the pipeline, and most importantly, a lot of employees were leaving to start their own development studios. West would be no different. In July 1994, along with Joel Jewett and Chris Ward, both of whom he'd met working at Malibu, West co-founded Neversoft Entertainment. They had already worked out a deal with Playmates Toys for a game on the Sega Genesis based on Skeleton Warriors, though this is where a common theme for Neversoft pops up: developing doomed games. Taken from Giant Bomb, the fate of Skeleton Warriors was thus: in December 1994, 5 months later, the game was cancelled by Playmates Toys. Not because they were unhappy with the development progress, but because they wanted to join the 32-bit bandwagon and develop the game for the new Sega Saturn. At this time, Neversoft had expanded by hiring 2 additional employees, a level designer and another artist. Work continued on into 95, and though the title was released, it wasn't the biggest success. Enough to keep the train going, but it was a bumpy road into 96 and 97. While the team grew ever larger, the contracts were getting smaller and smaller. Game Informer has the deets. Skeleton Warriors didn't exactly set the gaming world on fire, and the next couple of years were difficult ones for the fledgling studio. Work began on a game based on the Ghost Rider comic book series for Crystal Dynamics, but it was ultimately cancelled before completion. Neversoft kept the lights on by porting Shiny Entertainment's, the company formed by Dave Perry of Gakkai PlayStation Now fame, MDK to PC. Yeah, for a quick observation, Neversoft is connected to both Shiny Entertainment as well as Studio Trophus, since Christopher Ward was credited as a Trophus monkey. That's the White Chamber LTA for those wondering. Tangent over, the saving grace for Neversoft was a pet project by the name of Big Guns that they were working on for Sony, as it could have gotten them out of the hole, but it too was cursed like the Ghost Rider game. Its cancellation was the death nail for Neversoft, who was hemorrhaging money and employees. And what do you know? The devil always seems to step in to offer a deal when you're at your lowest. Returning to Game Informer, in 1998, Activision took an interest in the then close-to-death Neversoft. Though it wasn't impressed by Big Guns, it did see something in the game's underlying technology and graphics engine. Activision contracted Neversoft to revive a stalled project entitled Apocalypse, which starred Bruce Willis as the virtual hero and voice actor. Though the finished product was a fairly mediocre 3D shooter, Activision was sufficiently impressed with Neversoft's work to give it another shot, this time with a skateboarding game to be powered by the Apocalypse engine. This same engine would also be the basis for Neversoft's excellent Spider-Man game of 2000. This was the catalyst that blew up Neversoft into being a household name. They became the Tony Hawk and later Guitar Hero machine, the only deviations from that being the excellent Spider-Man PlayStation 1 game and the topic for today. There isn't much of a background to Gunn in the development sense. I figure much like what Mick says in the interview, not everyone wanted to pump out sequel after sequel for forever, and at this point in time, the early to mid-2000s, Neversoft was split into 2 teams, though I suspect what immediately grabs everyone's attention is the controversy surrounding the game, of how the Association for American Indian Development tried to boycott the title. Taken from GameSpot, the Association for American Indian Development has started a boycott of the game, saying it contains derogatory, harmful, and inaccurate depictions of American Indians. On the boycott's website, the group is hosting a petition and demanding that Activision clean up various aspects of the game before re-releasing it to retailers, or simply issue a worldwide recall of the game. On one hand, the Native Americans in Gun are the stereotypical war paint and tomahawk kind, not a glamorous depiction. On the other, the AFAID does go on to say that yes, we understand that this game is rated M for mature audiences, and yes, we understand that historically this kind of violence occurred all too often. So, historically speaking, I don't feel confident enough to comment. It's a weird ground, as yes, the Western pioneers and Native Americans did horrible things to each other and themselves in the real world, so Gun is accurate to some degree. Looking at you, the Battle of the Greasy Grass, aka Little Bighorn, and I would argue the latter group has some form of justification even if the violence was extreme. Chris Columbus and conquistadors and trailteers will bring that out of you. Not to go too far away from video games and into depressing territory, but America as a growing federalist republic treated the natives pretty terribly. On the other hand, the AFAID claims that there is an unabashed righteousness to the killing of Native Americans in the game is just not true. Spoiler for the story, the Apaches are the unabashed good guys who Colton was born to and is tricked into killing by the Confederate bad guys. It's weird as they forgive our main character at the drop of a hat, not because of any genocide angle. What ultimately came out of this controversy was the whole scalping currency was dropped, though you can still buy the knife in-game and scalp enemies for your own pleasure. Again, in Gun, you could do it to anyone, so you weren't exactly targeting anyone due to racial factors, but scalping around this time period of history definitely has overtones of scalp hunters, such as the infamous Glanton Gang, who were hired by both American and Mexican governments to deal with Native Americans. History's fun and not at all depressing to look back on, or live through. Where was I? Release. Funnily enough, Gun basically had a worldwide one in November of 2005, coming out on Windows, the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, the Xbox, and the 360. Beanox handled the PC port, while Rebellion were the masters of the PlayStation Portable version, Gun Showdown. I mentioned it during Def Jr. My choice was originally the GameCube emulated copy, owing to my familiarity with seeing the box art in the video rental store shelf, though it doesn't work properly. Something to do with how many characters get loaded in causes Dolphin to have a shit fit, so I switched over to PCSX2 as it was stable. There is a PC release on Steam, which I assume is the best version, though that's on you for giving Activision money. Our tale begins with some historical story time. 1542, somewhere in the southwest of America, Conquistador Francisco Vasquez de Coronado's second expedition for the city of Cavera, located near modern-day Mexico, ends in failure. Dramatically. You know these specific events didn't happen as the attacking Apaches take the Cross of Coronado, an Indiana Jones invention, away from what I assume were the friars left in New Mexico after Coronado himself declared the mission a bust. He had fallen off his horse in the year and figured his governor job in Nueva Galicia was less risky than looking for gold. He would later be tried for war crimes that didn't stick, though as a conquistador he most certainly partook in some, before dying of a disease in 1554. So much for historical accuracy in my fictional story. Why does this matter? 1880! Montana. Local mountain mid Ned and Colton White are on a hunting trip as that's what pays the bills. Elk and pheasant are prime game for the riverboats running routes in the area, their main supplier the Morning Star, though there might be more at play here. Ned doesn't want Colton to see him and an unnamed woman rummaging around in a safe stash on the vessel, and the priest aboard is... honestly, I'd trust Kodamine over this rabble-rouser. My thoughts are proven correct as Reed, that's the priest's name, we don't learn it until later, leads an ambush looking for whatever was hidden from our and Colton's eyes. The hit squad is decked out in ripped and torn gray uniforms, so you know which side of history they fought on. They weren't winners. In the chaos, Ned hands Colton a token for a whorehouse out in Dodge known as Alhambra, as if knowing his fate is tied to this sinking ship. Despite protests, Colton is shoved into the river as the steam engine explodes, killing Ned and knocking our guy out with some stray debris.
It's too late. That preacher killed her. Son of a bitch is leading the ambush.
Son, listen close, because there ain't much time. I've done my best to raise you right, but all your life I've been lying to you. The boilers are gonna blow. Quick, take this. That's a token to the Alhambra, the cat house in Dodge City. Go there and ask for Jenny.
I ain't leaving you, Pa.
God damn it, that's what I'm trying to tell you. I ain't your father. Now go.
Guess that means Colton is metaphorically and literally fatherless now. A few days after this event, Reed informs his employer, a one-eyed bastard / railroad baron known as Magruder, about the goings-on, but the failure to retrieve what was in the safe earns the priest the Van Gogh treatment. Around the same time, Colton comes to, and after a little negotiation with a fella named Honest Tom and his Boy Scouts, Mr. White has a ride into Dodge. Easily spotting the Alhambra, the woman Ned asks for Colton to talk to, Jenny, is a little tied up by local gang activity, but a few bullets here and there are enough to fix any problem in the West, giving Cole a lead on what happened on the riverboat. Too bad it points to neighboring town Empire, Dodge landlocked due to Apache activity. You can't blame them, the railroads they didn't ask for run through their ancestral land, so let's just say Colton's methods aren't agreeable to modern understandings of the Native American plight. Having a reasonably sized bucket of blood on his hands, Colton's trip to Empire to speak to Mayor Hoodoo about Reed has the lad get sidetracked into being a deputy and ultimately betrayed by the man. He's in cahoots with the priest and Cyclops. As he's the designated main character, the bad guys don't get the idea to Cole Kilton now. As he's the designated main character, the bad guys don't get the idea to kill Colton now and instead toss him in a jail cell for execution later. Jenny's not so fortunate. Luckily, one of the men who shares Colton's predicament is a member of the Resistance in this stretch of land actively fighting against Magruder's renegades. That's Port. The other is a bar of soap. Brand Jennings, thief and lockpick extraordinaire. Employing the gigabrain distraction tactic of, hey look, over there, the three escape before going their separate ways. Soap to Dodge, Colton and Port to the Resistance's base. The ringleader Clay initially has some disregards when met with Colton. He did gun down a number of Resistance members when Hoodoo tricked him into being a deputy, but a photo of Ned clears the air. Still, to prove his loyalty to the cause, Clay puts Colton to work, robbing a Gatling gun from one of Magruder's trains to help in the assault on Empire. Despite a few of the other resistors jumping the gun a bit and falling into a trap, the plan goes off without a hitch. Is what I would say if it wasn't revealed that the train had other cargo. Captured Apaches. Slavery is the hallmark of the Confederacy, after all. And while leader Many Wounds should gut Cole for the nonsense he pulled days back at Dodge, Magruder is the threat at large to his people. And yes, to get this non-reveal out of the way, Colton is Apache. He can't speak the language, yet he can understand it. That's what Ned meant by saying he wasn't his daddy.
Now I've set many free.
Where did you learn Apache?
I'm not sure. It's like I could understand what he was saying, but I couldn't quite speak it.
Better get back to the hideout and plan our strike.
Celebrating a job well done, Clay opens up a bit to Cole about the situation and why he's so gung-ho against Magruder. Ned and Clay were members of Magruder's company during the Civil War. By 64, the Confederacy was willing to do anything to turn the tide, up to and including approving Magruder and his men to search for Kavara. Turns out, a Dr. Campbell, no relation, had been to the City of Gold, or at least had the means to get there. the Cross of Coronado. One massacre later, one that Ned and Clay didn't sign up for, and here we are.
Your last.
Jesus, Tom.
Having time for games, Doctor.
Stop it, Tom. I never agreed to this. Count it!
At long last.
You son of a bitch! That cross is no good to you!
I will not be denied! Ow! Ah! Ah!
Had I stood up like Ned, Magruder might be in hell instead of back here doing his devilish work.
You mean he's still after Corvera?
The war ended, but his mission didn't. It's his holy grail.
One piece of the cross is sitting at the bottom of the river. The other, if you were eagle-eyed enough, makes up the shaft of Many Wounds' tomahawk. Playing spoil sport to this recollection and party are Magruder's men, and while the resistors beat back the main force, Clay is captured. Not for too long, however. Having a cannon at their side emboldens Cole and crew to launch an attack on Empire with the intent of rescuing Clay and killing Hoodoo. In the ensuing duel, Hoodoo informs Cole about where one of the cross pieces is, the one in the river, before our guy puts one in his dome. Hopefully Soap hasn't found himself in any, and he's being lynched. What did I say about bullets in the Wild West? Getting to the safe proves to be the tougher challenge, as Magruder's resident lapdog Hollister has been scoping the area around the Morningstar's wreckage and takes Cole and Soap hostage. He's one bad mamma jamma that Reed doesn't want to deal with. Anyway, after one Apache uprising and a third flashback, it's centered around Cole's core memory of getting mauled by a cougar. Hollister and Reed are killed, and one piece of the cross is recovered. Off to Many Wounds, giving us a fourth flashback. Among those who survived Magruder's massacre was a young Wounds and baby Cole, the two brothers. So, Ned raising Cole was basically penance. With the completed cross, Colton and Soapy find out that the city of Cavera is real and is on the side of a mountain. The Magruder is quick to ambush them and wrings the location of the city out of Soap. It's a quick rescue for Colton, leaving Magruder's personal bodyguard Dutchy in a pool of his own blood. The stage set, an alliance of Clay, Many Wounds, and Colton fight their way into the mine resting below Cavera, Colton and Magruder having a climactic showdown amidst the rubble and ruin of the lost city.
I don't see anything magnificent. Just a fat, one-eyed bastard whose greed has no boundary.
That sounds like Ned talking.
No, this is Ned talking.
Our story ends with Magruder's greed getting the best of him, Colton ushering him to an ironic death, buried under the rock and stone of the city he long searched for, as Colton and Many Wounds, I don't know, reconnect, ride off into the sunset. This story ends kind of abruptly, now that I think about it.
Hear that?
So long, Major. Give the devil my regards.
Wait. Oh, Jesus is coming down. Get back here. You can't leave me like this. Ah. Get back here. I can make it worth a while. Ah.
Now our fathers can rest in peace.
Okay, so I've actually seen this story before. Or, technically speaking, if we base this on release dates, after. If you're wondering, this is a pretty typical Western revenge story that is dime a dozen in the genre, just extremely wafer thin. A massive finger can be pointed at the good, the bad, and the ugly, as it set the trend for years to come. You could also throw into the ring a bit of Dances with Wolves, since Gunn is more focused on the Native American side of things, seeing as Colton is Apache and Magruder's militia is fulfilling the role of the Union from that film. Ironic, as it's a bit of the reverse in Gunn. Ned, a white former Confederate turned remorseful mountain man, adopts the native child Colton, as opposed to Union soldier Kevin Costner being pulled into the Lakota tribe, and it was the Union causing problems in Dances as opposed to the Confederacy here. Bottom line, and to cut a whole swath of history short, as this is a game review, not a lecture on atrocities, yeah, the native peoples of America have ample ammunition to throw around the phrase white devil. It does lead to some retroactive strangeness in the plot, I must say. Like, I get why the Apaches are gumming up the railroad work near Dodge, as Magruder's a baron of the industry. Not content with genocide in search of a golden trinket that doesn't belong to him, the sore loser is stealing land that isn't his to warp it for his own needs. So of course the Apaches would be a thorn in his side. That's all fine and good, but man, they sure do forgive Colton awfully fast for killing a roughly estimated 5 baker's dozen of their people. Friendly fire isn't, I might add. And that's really the crux of it. Colton gets away with murder by saying, "Oops, might be," and there being a bigger threat that everyone can unite against. One good deed or two isn't absolution, especially in the Wild West landscape. John Marston did all that work only for the Bureau of Investigation to stab him in the back. In a term, bland. A few more, tensionless, safe, and cookie cutter. Outside the ultraviolence, Gunn is basically an episode of The Lone Ranger. Colton is the designated good guy even when his actions are unscrupulous or are deserving of greater pushback from his allies. Clay and Port have but one tiny dust-up before letting Cole join the resistance, no questions asked, leaving a ton of interesting character dynamics on the floor. As an aside, glad to know that the trope of killing a relative of the main character in the first few moments of the story to get the audience emotionally attached isn't a modern invention. I'm sorry, Gunn, I don't know Ned from Nora or Nate. He's not my father, so why should I care that he dies? That's a problem the supporting cast suffers from. Cardboard cutout syndrome. Both the heroes and villains are as fleshed out as a blood smear. The most notable thing about Magruder's posse is that they are Confederates. That gives ample enough reason to shoot them, but as characters, they aren't engaging. They have a singular boilerplate trait that defines them, like greedy, creepy, treacherous, or deranged, leaving them all one note. Outside of that, you'll only remember who's who by their voice. I hear you, Ron Perlman and Lance Henriksen. I wish you guys had better material. No joke, Magruder's personal bodyguard, Dutchie was it? Doesn't say a damn word, so he's practically a living obstacle for Colton to overcome, like a Rancor or that Trent boss from The Legend of Spyro Eternal Night. And by the time he's introduced, Hollister's showing what it's like to be a human firework. Even Reed, the guy who thrust Cole into this journey, doesn't feel like anything except another body to throw on the pile. Twisted Preacher is a good archetype for a Western that involves Native Americans. Researching forced assimilation is your homework for the night, but it's simply character dressing so Reed isn't completely bare. The hero side doesn't get better. Half of them have a negative life expectancy. Oh no! Cherry? Shit, that wasn't her name. Maria? No. Jenny! Oh no! Jenny! Not her! I loved her personality? Wait, that sounds like I'm talking about her tits. Shit! Anywho, and tasteless joke aside, remember when Clay was kidnapped and tortured for all of one level? The wave of emotion I felt was indifferent. That's a perfect one-word descriptor for the whole affair. Indifference. Gun doesn't give a justifiable reason to care for its cast on any level, and so I'm left with a big ball of nothing. The good guy shoots the bad guy. Guess that makes this analysis pointless and an absolute waste of both my and yours time. How this was nominated for DICE's Outstanding Achievement in Story and Character Development in 2005, but not Shadow of the Colossus, tells you how rigged awards are. COD Big Red One won it that year. But wait, didn't I say I've seen this story before? Yes, and much better in all regards. Here's my housekeeping tab. Time period set after the Civil War, but before the turn of the century. A rogue band of Confederates acting as the villains in the story. A former Confederate who originally worked for the bad guys being a good guy. Greed being a motivator for the villain. A treasure hunt centered around a trinket that will unveil a city of gold. Conquistadors held the treasure in the past before something bad happened to them. The finale taking place in said city, ultimately leading to its burial under rock and stone. A character wearing a proper breastplate despite it being the late 1800s. Apaches having an impact on the plot, whether in a supporting or antagonistic role. A cross-county road trip. The protagonists have a complex relationship with their allies. You know what this is? Call of Juarez bound in blood. The similarities are uncanny and call attention to themselves as Bib has what Gun lacks. That being interesting characters and dynamics to go along with an enjoyable plot. There's a 4-year time difference between Gun and Kaj Bib, so copying the homework but doing it better isn't entirely off the table, though I would have to research the connection, as this could ultimately be what I said about the subject in Sonic Adventure 2, of how two different people can come to the same conclusion separate of themselves. Yet this is especially apparent with the position that Gun sits in as ground zero for open world westerns. Let alone Call of Juarez. Colton getting revenge for his dead dad reminds me of Jack Marston putting 2 in Edgar Ross's 10 spot. Soapy might as well be Irish from RDR. All this to say that if your game's story is reminding me of similar but better ones that actually made me feel something, you might want to message Houston's help desk. Let me be honest, I don't have much to say about Gun's presentation besides 2 details. It looks like the later Tony Hawk games, possibly because it is a revised version of the Apocalypse engine, which isn't exactly a positive. The saving grace for the Birdman is that while the games were scuffed looking, the various worlds and levels you skated through were colorful and full of personality. You don't forget Skatopia from Thug 2 or Airport from PS3. Gun takes place in the dusty back end of nowhere with little deviance, so surprise, I'm not wowed by the visuals. Especially since brown dominates the landscape, the little flashes of color you do get lost in mud. The best the game gets is the old fort overtaken by the renegades because it's at least something. Dodge and Empire rip straight out of your memories of what Old West towns look like, leaving them a generic shell of iconography. A long stretched out main street where desperados and lawmen can duel? A house of ill repute with all the blackjack and hookers you want? Brick and mortar buildings for banks, jails, and other dwellings? This is nothing new besides the little attention to detail that, yeah, the Chinese were one part of the Wild West melting pot next to the Irish, Mexican, and French populations. Tasting History of Max Miller has a neat video on the subject of saloon culture, and because I accidentally left them out here in my script, I should also include the Native American population. But I'll recognize I'm looking for anything to prop up in the wake of this insipid landscape. Sand, mountainsides, rock quarries, I've been here before. It's aggressively bland, a statement that can be made towards the characters as well. When the most interesting thing I can say about the cast is that Colton changes costumes every so often, and that the cougar scars he mentions he has are on his model, there's not much to talk about. You'll know who the villains are as they are comedically evil looking, almost to the point of parody that can be a bit hard to take them seriously, while the good guys look like regular, if somewhat stereotypical of the period, people. Cowboy, bandito, Apache, a mustache-twirling villain. All these archetypes and more make up the cast, so I bet you could toss names into the ring from other games, movies, or books that match. Red Steel 2 or Samurai Western this ain't.
Water tower, we should be able to hide and wait for them to bring him out. That's the last of them. Get up to the top of the water tower.
What's wrong, kid? Scared of your own shadow?
Come on now. You know, kind of Hey, somebody help me, please. Oh.
Making about the same fuss, the music of Gun can best be described as, yeah, I watched a John Wayne Western once. It's fine, but it doesn't leave a noticeable impact. You have the triumphant leitmotif synonymous of the genre, alongside the assorted strings and guitars, so while I wouldn't call it bad, it's indicative of how derivative Gun can be. It does the job it needs to, but it isn't memorable in the slightest. Again, I've found myself to be a broken record, as the voice acting isn't that spectacular, despite having some big names attached. Content as opposed to quality. Thomas Jane, the voice of main character Colton, works a treat in The Mist in 1922 if you've never seen either movie, so I know it isn't entirely him. Ron Perlman and Lance Henriksen, Hoodoo and main bad guy Magruder respectively, are two of the other Hollywood stars, but this is a far cry from Hellboy, and, well, take your pick from Lance's career. The material is hard to elevate as it's milquetoast. Doubly confirming this since Lance has had this same problem with Riddick, Assault on Dark Athena, and Detroit Become Human, where both stories don't give him much to do. My enjoyment of the cast is the novelty that it's Thomas Jane and the like doing the voice work, not that they are interesting characters. This isn't, ironically enough, Riddick, where Vin Diesel puts in a solid performance on top of the character being intriguing to a degree.
Please, kid. Just let me go. I'll give you whatever you want.
I want some answers. Let's start with a steamer. Why was it ambushed?
Tell me.
Or I'll turn your brains into wallpaper.
There was something on board. Something Magruder's whore had made off with.
Sadie. What was it she took?
I don't know. Only the preacher knew. Magruder sent him to get it back at all costs. But the bitch stowed it in the pilot's safe. It sank when the boilers blew. It's under 10 feet of water. You can't get to it.
When the snow's melting. This time of year, the water level's dropped a dozen feet or more. Thanks, Hoodoo.
You son of a bitch!
The item. Did he get that too? Put a price on that kid's head. I don't care how much. I want every bounty hunter, every mercenary, every damn snake in the Western Territories looking for that son of a bitch. No one is gonna stand in the way of my destiny. You understand? No one. Not the federal government, not the Apaches, and not some pissant kid with a six gun.
So I've been mostly harping on this gun's presentation. It's bad, right? The animation and sound quality are the saving graces. Not so much the sounds of the shoot bangs, they're punchy and you can't go wrong with them, but the little callouts that happen during gameplay steal the show. Enemies and allies react to most of what you do, whether reloading, gunning down waves of baddies, taking someone hostage, etc. Now, this isn't to fear levels, but it makes the fights feel alive, especially when you hear someone behind cover yell out for everyone to hear that you're reloading and now is the time to push. Or when you quick draw take down a squad of dudes and one of Colton's allies goes, "Damn, kid, you're a fast shot."
Go get him now! What's wrong, kid? She's got me! Oh, yeah! If he comes around this corner, let's let him have it. Kill that jackass! I got him! I got him! Hey, get back here! I ain't done!
Add in that enemies have a variety of things they say when they die, and that not every kill shot actually is one. You can see defeated threats sometimes try to crawl away with you being able to put them out of their misery, and you have yourself a game that is neat to look at when the action is happening. If there is one thing I will give Gun, damage reaction is spectacular. Want to know what my first thoughts were when I booted the game up and started playing? Okay, this gunplay is kinda alright, infinite ammo and pistols to facilitate. Did I just blow away that guy's entire skull? The reaction to where you shoot an outlaw is important, as that will determine a number of factors. Obviously, with these smaller caliber guns, they double over in pain with body and limb shots, while headshots will tear pieces of their face off. Graduating over to the larger caliber weapons, you can fully dismember targets. The Ferguson and long rifles atomize the cranium container if aiming for the head, and can take off arms and legs. Part of what I like about the shotguns is that they are purposely over the top. Anyone hit will get launched back about 5 feet, either crumpling to the ground or landing in a sitting position if they hit a wall, on top of causing dismemberment. A well-thrown Molotov will have people scrambling around on fire before giving up the ghost, all the while they scream bloody murder. Horseback combat adds to this. There are varied reactions based on if you shoot the rider off the horse or kill the steed. To me, it more than makes up for everything else, as you can tell that is where all the effort went into. And to round this out, I love the HUD elements. It's not a generic menu to select items from or tell how much ammo you have. It's a little flask showing you how many healing charges you have left, and the ammo counter mimics whatever gun is being used. So revolvers have the cylinder, the volcanic and Henry rifle have a stand-in for the tube, the bow has a miniature bow, while everything else has a breech face. I'm a sucker for whatever you call this in gaming HUDs, akin to Dead Space's diegetic HUD. Like I said, gun is scuffed, but the elements that shine eclipse those that don't. Gun is an open-world third-person shooter. Saying that aloud, and with the hindsight of knowing where the trajectory that this genre has gone, you can call this the precursor to Red Dead Redemption. First things first, though, the difficulty. There are 4 modes to choose from easy all the way up to insane. I would speculate that the AI gets smarter and deals more damage the more inevitable you get. There's some war stories about how hair-pullingly frustrating the mines can be, but for my normal experience, I found Gun to be average, if a tad bit on the easier side. More Desperado or Django than Bone Tomahawk or Blood Meridian. Before getting to blasting away racists and outlaws by the dozen, Gun starts with a 2-part tutorial that teaches the finer aspects of the Wild West: shootin' and riding. There are shared controls between both. Movement and camera are handled by the sticks. Jumping, when you have to, is mapped to X. Triangle is interact unless on horseback, it allows you to get off. L1 is throwables, R1 is the fire button, and R2 is quick draw. I'll get more into these later. But you can definitely see that the layout was made during an era when third-person shooters hadn't quite put together a unified scheme. Case in point, L2 is crouch, L3 is reload, R3 is aim down sights, but only for guns that allow it. Holding circle then hitting a direction on the D-pad changes your firearms. Circle by itself cycles between readied guns. The D-pad handles leaning, healing, and holstering, and because I forgot it, squares your melee attack, both on and off a horse. Systems are also built on top of those, like dodge rolling and hostage taking, so it can be a bit much to keep track of as your buttons are all over the place, especially if you're used to modern setups. L3 to reload, L2 to crouch, and how you have to claw your hand by holding circle to switch weapons are the sticking points. It's not the worst control scheme, but even as I was hours into the adventure, I would mispress at times. Let's keep it simple for now. Shooting is the main gameplay loop Gun will run you through. You might have an additional objective to do, as seen in the tutorial, where you have to sneakily kill elk from on high, or interact with a specific object like removing the board from the riverboat paddle to get to the next section. But most of the time you'll be doing this while gunning down waves of baddies, either by yourself or with some AI companions that can sometimes be competent, but aren't above needing to be babysat. One guess as to what happens when they die. Speaking of dying, your HUD is in the bottom left, telling you how much health, quick draw gauge, ammo, and healing flasks you have. Yes, Gun is Soulsborne confirmed. Colton's whiskey flask healing him to full-on use. Back on topic, dying and or failing will allow you to either restart at a checkpoint, which tend to be generous on top of missions not being all that long, or quit out to the open world in the event that you want to power up Colton through shop or stat upgrades. More on these later. Continuing with the shooting, you might think it awkward as shooters on console tend to be compared to mouse and keyboard, but there's a reason why the crosshair is as big as it is. As long as you're in the vicinity, you'll either hit by being accurate or by the mild auto-aim. Generally, Colton will latch onto a target to ease the process, though this is dependent on what gun he is wielding. Pistols, lever-action rifles, and shotguns tend to track a bad guy without your input as long as the crosshair is close, or hit even if the enemy is slightly out of it, while the long rifles and bow require you to be exact. Standard effective ranges apply, with the shotguns and pistols being mid to close, the lever actions and bows being mid to long, and they aren't called long rifles for nothing. Before continuing, guns and other weapons are given to you over the course of the journey, usually as a reward for finishing a story mission, and you are free to equip what you want, but they are split into categories. They do follow a traditional flow, though. Every new weapon you are given is better than what came before it, besides the melee weapons, Molotovs, and sticks of dynamite. Colt's, On's single army action is replaced by his dad Schofield, followed by the Volcanic, and then the dual Peacemakers. However, you can only have 2 guns readied, one of the pistols and whatever you want from the other options. To offset this, while all the other guns and throwables require ammo found on dead enemies or supply caches, the same goes for flask refills, the pistols never run dry besides needing to be reloaded. Everything besides the pistols can be aimed down sights. The pistols have quick draw for that, which tends to help when trying to shoot faraway targets, as the auto aim seems to only work in mid to close range encounters. ADS also helps when going for specific shot combos like disarming headshots or knocking arrows or TNT out of the air, though quick draw is better in this regard. As it's the main gimmick, quick draw is the I win button, closer to COG gunslingers rather than Red Dead's Deadeye. Pressing R2, you slow down time and immediately ready your pistol in free aim, allowing you to dispense lead at your leisure. While you can use the right stick to move the reticle, you can also snap to threats by flicking the left control stick if they are nearby. This doesn't work for arrows or dynamite during the times you have to shoot them. Quick draw isn't free, however. Run out of meter and you'll be booted out of the mode. You can choose to end it early to preserve some time, however kills and kill combos both inside and outside quick draw, as well as the special combos I mentioned earlier, fill the gauge back up. That means killing fast and killing often, brutally, uniquely to keep quick draw topped up. This doesn't create an endless feedback loop, mind. Gun will recognize if you've been in quick draw for an extended period and exponentially drain the meter to keep things somewhat fair. Where was I? As I felt like I fell down a rabbit hole. Structure as the horsies play a bigger part there. So, story missions generally have an objective you need to complete, which can range from what I said about the tutorial to defending characters, carrying and placing objects, racing against time on horseback, a few turret moments here and there, and one mandatory stealth section, usually a blend of a few like you see during the trip to Empire, but once you finish one, you are dropped off in the open world, free to do whatever. Or, more aptly, to explore around for gold veins, purchase items from shops, and engage in side activities, as this was before the advent of fast travel. You can begin story missions from the map menu in the pause screen, alongside reviewing your checklist, swapping out rated weapons, and looking at your stats. You'll need to physically travel the distance, either by walking. Last I checked, we weren't playing Pathologic here, so don't do this for your own sanity, or by horseback. Most of what you can do on foot, you can do on hoof, just switch out the melee attack with a trample that is incredibly busted if you can close the gap, and crouch with spur. Think of spurring as your accelerator, and turbo, and cruise control? And it'll be the number one reason why your horse drops dead. Notice the bar surrounding Colton's HP? That's the horse's health. It hits 0, it dies, and you have to find a new one. I mean, that makes sense, but his horses only spawn in designated areas in the open world. Having Mr. Ed bite the big one due to your own incompetence, or everyone else wanting a cut of your gib, can be annoying. Spurring, besides being the fastest way to get your horse to giddy up, drains your pony's health when you do it, so you can overexert the animal either to its death or create the conditions that a stray bullet will be enough to send it out to the glue factory. I just realized I haven't spoken about who you go up against. Outside of animals who are exclusively melee and the idiots who think charging at you with a tomahawk or cavalry sword is a good idea, this isn't Hunt Showdown. It's dudes with guns and bows. Sometimes on foot, sometimes on horseback, sometimes on a placement like a turret or cannon, and sometimes throwing dynamite or Molotovs. They all die the same, and the singular difference is the damage they cause. So standard bandits and outlaws will tickle Colton's nutsack with their Henry rifles, while Magruder's personal guard can 3-tap him with their Fergusons. Bosses are the same thing minus the one-eyed man himself, who you'll see in bad. Returning to horses, of course, to avoid spurring your steed into the ground, you either hold the spur, which will make it gallop at a steady pace, or you let it go so it can regenerate its HP. Prepare to see this prompt a lot, especially during some of the side missions. Money doesn't grow on trees in Gun, and since stores sell upgrades to either Colton's person, like more flasks, more ammo capacity, or specific weapons, better reload damage, you'll want that cheddar. So either get to looking for gold veins if you have the buyable pickaxe upgrade, though that might as well be penny pinching as each vein gives $10, while upgrades are usually $30 to $50, or complete side missions. These range from deputy work, which requires you to go all around dodge, fulfilling tasks like escorting or rescuing a character, taking out hostiles, basically anything you can think of in a story level just mixed together in a short runtime. Federal missions, which are micro main missions, bounty hunting with optional dead or alive caveats, Pony Express, those are the horse races against time as you deliver items to characters, ranching, think of Red Dead Redemption's cattle or horse husbandry tasks. Hunting, where you have to go out and find a specific animal to kill with your bow via headshot. It sucks. In Texas Hold'em. What amount of money you are given is dependent on the job, like real life. But the biggest reason to do these side tasks is that they award stat upgrades to Colton. There is the mildest RPG format within Gun, kind of like Tony Hawk, but there isn't an explanation within the game, so you kind of have to hazard a guess as to what these cover. I don't know if Quick Draw makes the gauge longer or gives you more time in it, but there is a noticeable difference when you have or don't have certain upgrades or levels under your belt. There isn't any New Game Plus, but as this is a Neversoft title, there are secrets, such as Magruder's shotgun being an unlock, and a hidden rifle that is gotten by 100% completion, as in all side missions and gold veins found. Want to fill out a checklist? I know I don't. Shocking twist, it's the gunplay. Who'd have thought a game called Gun would have fun gunplay? Akin to Call of War as Gunslinger, Gun goes for arcadey action, though you can play it tactically if you want / the need arises. The focus, and dare I say main appeal, of the game is on quick draw and reenacting many a scene from westerns. I think of the opener from Once Upon a Time in the West, though the level design facilitates the low and slow approach, having ample cover to support that playstyle. And this isn't like a number of modern cover shooters where there's a button that lets you wall saddle and you go from there. Gun has you lean around physical cover that you have to position yourself on manually. I've always preferred that manner of doing things, as it feels more involved than knowing that as long as you have mounted yourself onto cover, you're safe from most things. It makes gunfights naturalistic in my eyes, unlike having set objects in the environment be preordained as cover. It turns it into a scramble, both for you and the AI, while also not being a complete fallback. There will be numerous times where you'll be flushed out of cover because it might not be the best, someone throws a stick of dynamite to get you, or a mad lad comes charging your position, in the same breath that you can cleverly snipe dumbasses out of their cover because their heads stick out a bit, or you can push because they decided to turtle up. I haven't covered it yet, but there is a meat shield system at play here. If you damage an enemy, whether through melee, the reliable option, or ranged, they'll be stunned for a brief moment, allowing you to grab them. Now, this is used to capture bounties alive, but in stray encounters, you can effectively move up a choke point without worrying of getting blasted as hard. The tighter hallways of the Alhambra were basically made to show this off, as the second story has a bunch of side rooms that dudes will pour out of or take pot shots at you as you try to cross. And since you're without throwables at this point, your choices are the waiting game if you're patient, or body shielding if you want to get a move on. Neither option is incorrect, it's whatever you prefer in the moment. Even though I'm allergic to using throwables in any game, period, I did find some usage with both the Molotovs and sticks of dynamite. It seems like the fireball created by thrown Molotovs is able to hit around cover, getting you some cheeky kills here and there, but using it on bunched up targets is the way to go. The bridge mission right after you get the firebombs is the clear example, both in inflaming groups of enemies as well as creating hazard zones that they can't traverse through without getting toasty, but they can find their marks in other levels as well. The train robbery for the Gatling gun has you fire on Magruder's train from on high, using the rocky terrain as cover while giving you perfect sight lines for sniping or bombing. Without getting deep into the weeds, a number of the gunfights gun takes you through are fun in their own right, either because of the set pieces you blast through. The Trek to Empire has you play escort before going into a wave-based defense part, and then ending with riding on top of the carriage as all chaos happens around you, or you are taken into varied locations. The mission that ends with Hoodoo's fight has you battle in the streets of Empire to set up a cannon, and then you sneak into the corrupt officials' casino through a hidden opium den. The whole back half of getting to the boat safe is teaming with both sides. You start off rescuing Soap from an impromptu lynching, up to and including sniping his hangman's rope. Then you have to Metal Gear your way out of Hollister's camp with some Apaches, ending with a full-on raid against the compound. Returning to throwables, dynamite can be lit and tossed normally, but you can also extinguish the wick to create traps. That way you can maximize your damage while not being worried about the timer. Or for those trick shooters in the crowd, you can shoot both your own and mob's dynamite out of the air for an instant explosion. Just another usage that Quick Draw has if you want to be low and slow instead of spontaneous. There's a flow that gun has, as you can dip into this or transition out and go on a bloody rampage with Quick Draw. The choice is almost always up to you. I will say I do prefer the Quick Draw side. Quickly eradicating gangs of baddies will never not be fun to me. Oh no, outgunned and manned by a factor of 10. Whatever will I do? It becomes its own micro game of seeing how long you can stay in Quick Draw before you either run out of targets or time. It is overpowered to hell and back. The bosses don't know what to do when you unload into them with Quick Draw, and I swear the pistols get a damage buff when you use it, though being free with quick drawing can lead to its own conundrums. The I.E. not having access to the ability out in the open, or when some of the stronger enemies are in your face, can spell disaster. This is a fine time to mention that you aren't invulnerable in it either. Gatling gunners and faraway targets will make mincemeat out of you, and if you're the type to rack up the kills in Quick Draw, the exponential drain on the meter will leave you with no fodder to refill it. The dodge roll does alleviate some of this. Enemies aren't entirely accurate if you roll around, but falling out of position can be a death sentence. That's what I mean by balance, and probably why the bosses are as weak as they are. Guns combat works better for groups. I'm reminded why the standout boss battles in Red Dead Redemption or Call of Juarez were high noon duels. Quick Draw is merely one piece of the puzzle, though. I relatively enjoy Colton's roster of armaments. Relative is all acknowledged that the later pistols and enhanced lever actions leave the regular shotguns and long rifles in the dust. The bow has a special place for it during Magruder's fight, but I still found myself experimenting with what worked well where. The pistols are godlike, with their infinite ammo, quick reload, and moderately high damage, especially with the volcanic and dual peacemakers, those two becoming absolute monsters when in quick draw, but they have a stubby range that the lever actions alleviate. When you purchase all the upgrades for the Henry, as you don't get the Ferguson till near the end of Colton's path to revenge, it can drop a bad man from the next zip code over. That offsets its slower than average fire rate, leaving you susceptible to downtime. Until you get the Ferguson. I don't know what magic Colton's performing to make a black powder breech-loading rifle from the Revolutionary period act like a Winchester. I think Neversoft confused the Ferguson with a Springfield 1873 trapdoor breech loader, but even then, neither gun equaled a Winchester in fire rate. Best you'd get is 6 a minute with a Ferg, 15 a minute with a Spring, if you had dexterous hands compared to the average 15 to 30 a minute for a Henry rifle, but I'm not complaining about accuracy. Ferguson's fired a ridiculous cartridge, .615, or if you want caliber size, .650. That's a large bullet. Bigger than a Springfield's 45-70 government, and both long rifle calibers, seen as one is a Sharps, making it a .52. There's a reason why the Ferguson can dismember like the latter, and generally one-shot most threats. It kinda makes the long rifles obsolete, as they're your go-to for sniping, and they get the job done for better or worse, but the Ferguson reloads faster, gets store upgrades, and has more ammo. I find them harder to justify, unlike the shotguns. Even if shotguns have terrible ammo pickup, it's 15 max without the carrying pouch, 20 to 25 whiff. They have good economy, as they're the only gun that can hit multiple targets with a single blast. A shotgun surgeon, if you will. Horseback combat in tighter hallways is where they shine, as trying to be accurate on those four-legged terrors is a nightmare, and you're better off trampling than lining up sights on any of your other weapons, and, well, you can ask the Germans what they thought about shotguns in trench warfare. The bow, I can take or leave. It's cumbersome to pull out in a straight fight, has one spot on the open world where its ammo is replenished, you can't retrieve arrows off corpses, and is relegated to the 2 pseudo-stealth sections if you prefer quiet than loud, but the dynamite arrows are helpful for dealing with Magruder. Oh boy, do I have things to say about the mines. The biggest damp squib in the entire game is the final mission. Both the level and boss portions are no good, but in divergent ways. As it makes up 3/4 of the finale, the shootout through the mines is marred by one aspect: mandatory turret sequence. If this was the Gatling gun, it wouldn't be a problem, as it shreds through flesh and bone like Richard Gatling thought it would. But no, you're locked down with the cannon. Whereas the Gatling has a crosshair that you can rely on, the cannon is fired through sheer faith and estimation. And bad hit registration. Coupled with a slow firing rate, the reload is about 3 seconds, and you can quite easily get overrun or perforated for your troubles, since you are fighting Magruder's Rangers, who come standard with a rifle that is the equivalent of Colton's Ferguson. That's a common hazard to your health. If you don't immediately land your shots where you need to, say goodbye to half of your HP, or if you're cursed with greater unfortunateness, that's a restart from a checkpoint. You might be thinking the solution is easy: ignore the cannon and fight on foot. Colton's loadout at this point in the game is massively overpowered both for crowds and one-on-ones. The Ferguson and dual peacemakers make short work of the Rangers. The counter to this is that the cannon is needed to break barricades, deal with Gatling pillboxes, and if you ever hop off of it, it will not follow you. Oh, and you need to leave the hot seat to switch the tracks every so often to get further into the mines. So, the fork in the road is this. Stay on the cannon so you can open up the path knowing that the Rangers will be duck hunting your ass, or get off of it and clear the pathway on foot before returning to move it forward. None of those are fun decisions. The former will leave you, as mentioned, riddled with holes that'll be pissing whiskey, while the latter kneecaps the pace of the stage. Stop and start is the finale's other problem, as you're already having to pull levers and slowly inch up the track while manning the main gun, so pick your poison. Whoever thought that there needed to be a defense segment where you have to wait for the resistance members to rotate a misaligned track into place so you can go deeper all the while Magruder's militia lazily pour into the area to stop you, clearly didn't realize how awful the pace already was and wanted to add more to the misery. But let's not leave old One Eye out of this either. To be honest, none of the bosses in Gun are great. With how busted Quick Draw is, most don't put up any kind of fight, and even without it, as I messed up when dealing with Reed, thinking I could kill his horse when it's invulnerable, and I died to Dutchy as I over-relied on Cole's tankiness when I should have healed. Colton's guns hit like a howitzer. Forget dodge and shoot, this is the epitome of shoot at it until it dies. Up until you get to Magruder. Apparently, a rusted Jimmy-rigged breastplate is enough to stop 45 ACP and .615 caliber balls, so instead of directly confronting the renegade, you have to play a game of peekaboo to lure him onto exposed gas mounds that can be ignited with dynamite and in turn hurt Magruder. That's the theory. Practice, Magruder's AI fluctuates between slowly circling around the arena, making it a real bitch to time dynamite explosions with either the thrown sticks or explosive bow, as you have to contend with two sources of delays, Magruder's walk speed and the cooking period. Throwing triplets of dynamite to flush you out, which getting caught in the blast is a one-shot, and bullseyeing with his unique shotgun. If the one-eyed man can see you, he'll hit you. He's programmed not to miss if you're in his line of sight, and his cobbled-together freak gun is a 3-tap. You can already see how frustrating this combination is, but God forbid if you need to resupply during the fight, as you might as well hand your ass over to Magruder on a blood-stained platter, since the only places to fill up on ammo and swigs are the corners. Making matters worse, at certain health thresholds he'll go into chase mode, throwing out dynamite with increased further, and actively pursuing you so that he can get a clean shot. That means readjusting the time difference for the gas traps, while also making sure you don't accidentally step into Magruder's cone of vision. Tying off this fetid bow, this is a two-faced fight. Thankfully, a checkpoint is placed between both portions, but now you have to headshot Magruder under the stressors of his bullshit hit scan, fervor love of TNT, and elevated position. Merely peeking your head out will see it blown off, and you have to hit him at least 3 times. The specifier there is because he throws det packs when hit that have to be shot, whether out of the air or when they land, so you can conclude this monument to suffering. It's not fun, and I can only imagine what it's like on hard or insane. It doesn't feel climactic as it's a chore to play through, and instead of the usual feelings you'd get from beating a final boss, my sole emotion was relief for never having to do this ever again. I would much rather play 10 rounds of in-game Texas Hold'em, the one minigame I despise in Gun. Part of it has to do with me not understanding the rule set. That's on me. Most betting I do in video games is breaking blackjack and Fallout New Vegas. I do think Gun could ease a player into Hold'em, like how Poker Night at the Inventory keeps track of hands and odds, but that's a separate discussion. What isn't fun is taking the mind game out of the mind game. The AI is pathetic in Texas Hold'em, as it'll bounce between folding at the drop of a hat if it has nothing, to betting to high heaven if it has something. With the former, they won't let the hand play out even to their own detriment. Why you'd fold as small blind before raising has even started is a mystery to me. And they'll crumple with a high enough one if you have a good hand. It's like they can see what cards you have, so when you try to fake bluff to pull in some suckers, they won't fall for it and bow out. If they do bite, that's because they have the Red Dragon in special. Occasionally you'll get into a raising war and come out on top of the winning hand, but that's the exception, not the rule. What tips this into aggravation is that Gun tricks you into playing Texas Hold'em, as it offers the highest amount of income starting off, but by mid-game bounties, deputy missions, and federal business award easier money, and more importantly, stat bonuses for less annoyance. Factor in that there aren't many upgrades, some of them are traps like the scalping knife and sharpened axe, and gold hunting making up some of the funs if you look. The singular reason to play Hold'em is for completion's sake. File the hunting tasks under the same drawer, as there's no reliable way to track your quarry. You have to kill the animal with a headshot from the bow close up, and if you spook it, you have to reload the area. The economy is weird in Gun in that most of what you'll want and or need can be bought by the third to halfway point. The rest is fluff, leaving the shops with nothing to offer past a certain threshold. Money becomes a useless resource. Weapon balance definitely has its hand in this, since the pistols and lever action rifles outperform everything else at any range, leaving pockets in the arsenal. I can't say I didn't like using the shotguns, bows, or long rifles, especially since damage reaction is spectacular in Gun, but the consistency and ammo abundance of the pistols and lever action rifles made them the best option. Doubly so since the former has infinite ammo, while the latter is a one-hit kill if you have both damage upgrades. And let me be clear on this. The developer who came up with the idea of your horse's health and gallop meter being one and the same should have been hog-tied to train tracks. The later Pony Express missions are nightmarish, as you can't go too fast, you know, when you're on the clock. Otherwise, everyone in the world who somehow knows you're on delivering duty and took that personally will drop your horse dead with a grazing shot. I did enjoy my time with Gun, though it has noticeable faults. For as fun as the gunplay is, it's a heady blend of chaotic run and gun that can be surprisingly tactical at times. You get railroaded into the pistols and rifles all too often as the go-to solution. The open world is a neat idea on paper, but it becomes annoying to backtrack between side objectives due to how horses work, and outside of random bandit attacks and scouring for gold, it's dull and lifeless, and the game ends with a wet fart. The strength of Gun hangs on its gameplay, which I do think carries the modest runtime, but not without some kicking and screaming. What I wasn't expecting while making this video was learning all about Mick West's career post game development, as this is post-video, thus I can say whatever. Yeah, he believed in aliens as a kid until all that was disproven, and he settled on doing the same for other people. Mick would get into debates on old message boards, which was a slow and laborious process due to dial-up and how modems were. Him getting into game development could legitimately be considered a side quest in his life, as after he left Neversoft, he didn't want to make Tony Hawk games forever, like I said. He got back into the old habits and began editing Wikipedia pages to disprove conspiracy theories. He is a leading expert on chemtrail, UFO, and Morgellon conspiracies, and he does the Louis Theroux thing of using empathy to help people break out of conspiratorial thinking. Just a neat dude all around, which is not exactly something that is commonplace in the games industry. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, become a ticket holder or don't. I ain't your Uncle Tony Hawk. And as always, this showing of Gun is over, but stay tuned for our next feature. A dip back into the seedier side with one of the inheritors of MGQ's legacy, 3 Charms.